It hurts me to see such a beautiful form of visual storytelling being tossed aside in favor of authenticity and realism. The animation industry is suffering from the idea that live action is a cheaper alternative that still yields results. There are many animated shows and movies that have broken records that live action media just can't keep up with. The importance of animation is being neglected. I want to go over the history of animation to pull from the origin, so we can look at why it's still so important. Snow White was the first groundbreaking work in animation to hold the public in a frenzy. It's the first full-length animated film to ever come out. It started the golden age of Disney. The wishing well scene demonstrated the potential that animation had and convinced Disney to go through with making the movie. The next industry-changing movie was Toy Story. It was the first fully computer-animated film, shaking up what we can do with technology instead of the tedious hand-drawn process. This has evolved to more modern projects taking the spotlight, like Shrek for its subversive take on the Disney formula, and the 2D plus 3D stylization of the Spider-Verse series. The process at the time included drawing each frame by hand, which had a high production cost with a lot of risk. Snow White received huge profits and positive feedback. However, the later films were not making enough money until the Renaissance period of Disney, where they improved their stories. There's a delicate balance. At first, the stories just supplemented the art, but audiences started expecting more complex stories, especially with the changes happening in live-action film narratives. This period was such a success that other studios had to throw their hat into the ring of animation to compete with Disney. Many films during the Golden Age had their backgrounds and settings inspired by European styles to highlight the mark the Grimm brothers left on these stories. Later on, mainstream animation became more Western except for the popularity of anime with Japanese styles. So what does animation bring to the table? Animation allows for more emotions to flow through the screen that can't be shown on an actor's face or given through dialogue. It captures subtlety that can't be replicated. We get the opportunity to learn more about the character's feelings and personality through visual cues. The usage of color can also be used to evoke certain emotions. We feel more connected to these characters and develop emotional attachments, getting us invested in the story. Emotional investment is vital to entertainment, which is literally what reality TV clings on to. A brilliant example is Finding Nemo, on how the experience of losing a loved one already gives us the vulnerability to form a connection in the first few minutes of the movie. Animated movies get to use visuals to their advantage to play out metaphors and pathetic fallacies that subconsciously help us understand the subtext of the message being conveyed. Animation has a lot more flexibility as a medium, since the mere fact that it's hand-drawn or digitally rendered takes away any realism and allows for suspension of disbelief. Realistic films have their advantages of boosting commentary to highlight that it's happening in our everyday life. However, the suspension of disbelief lets animation tell different and more compelling stories that make use of fantasy elements. This makes it more digestible for a casual audience, which spreads awareness. It also makes serious topics like mental illness easier to watch, as historically, it's hard for audiences to watch bad things happen to good characters. Additionally, it helps bring new commentary ideas to life, as it might seem absurd in live action when the idea is ahead of its time. An example is how the idea of factions, presented in every YA dystopian book, was done better in The Owl House. Compared to something like Divergent, the factions feel like something that would never happen. But in The Owl House, we've already accepted that their world is different from ours. The medium is truly special. Fantasia was such a genre-breaking film, where instead of music accompanying a story like in musicals, the story was built around the music. This let the music shine, while keeping things entertaining for a larger audience. Animation is the only medium that can accomplish such flexibility. Animated media tends to have better scores that challenge music genres, since they don't fit in the repetitive themes used in live action, and they're allowed to be more subversive. An aspect of the show Superstore that I really appreciated is the use of visual gags for humor, and animation achieves this in numerous ways, as characters can be physically bent and shaped to tell jokes. The world building in animation is unmatched. The artists get to splurge a lot of creativity into making a stunning world. In fantasy stories, when they're live action, the settings often use a lot of CGI, making it feel honestly artificial. While it's trying to appeal to a sense of realism, it ends up being a mess. Casual representation is done in animation. While it's good to spread awareness of deeper rooted issues in society regarding different races, genders, and sexualities, it's also important to normalize our differences. Drawing attention can also cause the opposite effect representation is used for. Every artist has a different style to express themselves, which makes every animated film feel fresh. A newly popular approach from Sony is the style of mixing 2D elements with 3D animation. This draws attention to certain visuals, highlighting important details. Animation lets heavy topics be represented in various manners. It's up to the creators if they want to add concepts that have meaning related to our real world for commentary. A captivating part of the movie Soul is how part of the message is up to interpretation. This lets viewers feel more engaged and connected to the movie, simultaneously provoking critical thinking. This is easier through animation, as live action has a lack of suspension of disbelief, taking the things we see a lot more literally. A good example is how we see Luz cope with grief in the Owl House. It feels easier to resonate with. It helps people connect with their struggles. It makes them feel like they're not alone. We all have a single scene that inspired us to feel deeply about animation, even if it's a short visual that stuck with you. Pixar is known for making those scenes, which is why it's held to such a high standard to continue. Personally, the entire movie of WALL-E felt beautiful. There are only 2 words used in half of the dialogue, and yet its visual narrative tells a simple but entrancing romance story. The fact the art of animation carried the entire movie, keeping it entertaining and riveting, proves the importance of animation. Thank you for listening to my rant on a topic that needs some light, especially right now. Goodbye.